Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm one of your hosts, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined by two awesome co-hosts this week. Nate Heininger, how you doing, Nate?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here.
And my brother and bro host, Shane S. Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
I'm doing super good.
And this week we're talking about Kero Blaster from the developer of Cave Story, Daisuke Pixel Amaya.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we jumped into this game, mostly because it is the second game of 3 weeks that has both the word blaster in it and involves a confusing story about a frog. So, Master Blaster Part 2, if you will.
Until you said that, I hadn't made that connection or quite realized that this was becoming a theme month for us now. But yeah, you're right. This is a shooter, a retro-styled pixel art platformer shooter with Blaster in the title and a frog as a central character. So not planned.
There's even probably a little bit of a nod to Master Blaster right in the title of Kero Blaster.
I actually kind of wonder about that because it wasn't called Master Blaster in Japan, and Master Blaster was never really
Wait.
the
Blaster Master.
Excuse me, Blaster
We
Master.
keep saying it backwards.
Yep.
We had the same problem on the Blaster Master episode.
Yeah. That game was never really popular over there, so I wonder if the developer would really be all that familiar with or influenced by it. And they are pretty different in a lot of ways. I think that the game's influences, we'll talk a lot about the game's style, but I think it wears a lot of its influences kind of on its sleeve. It's very Mega Man-y, very run and gun, like Contra-esque, very... It's very different from Cave Story, Pixel's kind of most well-known and celebrated work.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Cave Story. So even before we started this show, that was one of my first kind of intros into the concept of indie gaming. I mean, it was almost everyone's first kind of intro into indie gaming because it was just really one of the first, like, top to bottom indie games. It was a true one-man project. Pixel, he did everything, and everything is great. Music, animation, the gameplay. I mean, I could go back and play that game right now and enjoy it.
And in fact, you can. I mean, it's been re-released and remastered, and it's coming out on the Switch in like 2 weeks. Like,
of course it is.
It's been re-released and re-explored 100,000 times, but because it's one of the great indie games and one of the first,
just one of the great games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pixel is one of the great developers. I think I think his name is going to go down in history as one of the best kind of auteur individual developers that ever lived.
And he has this incredible style that carries through all of his works, both Cave Story and Kero Blaster. Kero Blaster is the sort of follow-up to Cave Story, and it's kind of an odd follow-up. I remember back in
That makes it sound as though this is a sequel, which it absolutely is not.
Yeah, it's really strange. When I first heard that this game was coming out back in 2014, I was very, very excited because I thought that it was likely to be a Cave Story sequel or something very like Cave Story. And the more that I heard about it at the time, the more I was like, well, that's not what I want. I want more Cave Story. And at the time, I ended up not very much liking it. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that this came out at the height of the iOS indie boom. And so this was... this was a iOS first game. This came out in 2014. I'll find the dates here in a second, but it came out first.
I think 2014.
Yes, 2014. It was May 11th, 2014, and it came out exclusively on the iPhone. And then it came like 6 months later to PC via like Steam and Playism.
I think that was probably a really good business decision at the time because, you know, the indie scene on iOS was really big. Delivering to iOS exclusively, even for a short time, could often get you, and I believe for this game did get App Store kind of featured status, for a while, which is a guaranteed way to make money even today. And, I think all of that served for me to obscure the incredible awesomeness of this game. Because I tried to play it through these touchscreen controls that are just not suited to the style of gameplay at all.
It has a couple of good ideas with the touchscreen controls, and it's doable, but it just didn't click for me at the time.
Yeah, it came out at a time, you're talking about like the indie boom, but it also came out at a time where people thought that they could be the one to make a game on iOS that is a action platformer that often requires very precise movement, and it would be possible and enjoyable with touchscreen controls. It wasn't until, I guess I can only think of like Leo's Fortune is one of the only games I can think of that had like sort of actiony touchscreen controls.
I don't know, even that, like, I think people figured out that the only way to make that kind of thing work is to make it floaty as hell and really forgiving, and that's something that
and an auto runner, like basically that's all that you can do in terms of platformers on iOS today, and still be sure that people are going to put up with your control scheme.
Yeah, whereas this game, its control scheme on iOS, and not to get too sidetracked with that, because we're not really talking about the iOS version today, but it is how I first experienced the game. And we'll talk about all the details of what it plays like in a little bit. But Kero Blaster
is awesome. It plays great.
It is. It's awesome. Kero Blaster is a shooter, a side-scrolling action platformer shooter in the style of games like Mega Man or maybe Contra or things like that. It's got the very, very pixel style of, and when I say pixel, I'm talking about the developer. It's got his style of level design, but it has a very sort of Mega Man-ish sort of feel to the progression through those levels. And if you thought, wow, playing a Mega Man style game on the iPhone, that sounds awful, then you're right. It kind of didn't work out too well. They had one very clever idea, which was basically that rather than having, so you have left and right buttons on screen to move left and right, and then you have a jump button. And you also have, rather than a button to shoot, you have a lever that you can pull in 3 directions, left, right, or up, to shoot. And then you would pull the lever in that direction, and then the frog, the central character frog, would just continue to shoot in that direction. So that was actually a kind of a good idea. You could point him to the right, he would continue to shoot to the right until you told him to do otherwise, and then you could focus on moving him around the screen. But ultimately, it didn't work for me personally. I know a lot of people really liked that version of the game, but that kind of soured me on it, and later, 6 months later, when it came out on PC and Windows only, I didn't even really give it a second look. So here we are, years and years later, and it has, surprise, come out on the PlayStation 4. And I thought, wow, actually, maybe I should give that another try. And, I mean, that's where we are. I gave it another try, really, really enjoyed it, way more than I did back in 2014. And, I mean, wow, I think I'm so glad that I gave it a second look.
I don't know how this managed to bubble up back into our top of our list right at the same time as Blaster Master, but it does sort of feel like NES era nostalgia platformers are having kind of a moment.
I think it's just we happen to be looking at two of them at the same time. I mean, I feel like these
it's me that's having the moment.
Nostalgia driven isn't really the right word, because it is just an art style that is maintained from that time. These are still because the indie scene is so huge now, and the tools that are needed to develop these sorts of games are infinitely available, and so we're just always going to see games like this.
Yeah, and I don't look at this, Shane, and think that this is an NES style game at all. Even this or Cave Story. Pixel has his own kind of house style. And it feels to me like a kind of it's clearly retro, and it has this very retro aesthetic, but it feels like something sort of out of place in time. It feels like some sort of a weird midpoint between 16 and 8 bits, and it has these incredibly bright, beautiful, colorful sprites that are blocky and chunky, but have this expressive color scheme that you would never have seen on those sorts of platforms. I look at this game and immediately see, this is a Pixel game. This is from Pixel.
So here's the thing about the sprites. You say maybe this isn't NES style to you, but to me, it reads very much like an NES game, and in fact, way more so. This is a simpler art style than Cave Story does, which reads more along the lines of a Super Metroid to me. But to start with, I want to talk about the sprite of the frog, who looks like his head is made out of just a single pixel stair-step pattern with one horizontal eye and one horizontal line for the mouth. And he's so simple. He's even a standout as a simplified, like low effort, maybe not low effort, low complexity character, even compared to the other sprites in the game.
He seems to be one of the oldest elements, because this game, its development history is kind of long, and it was announced very long before the game originally came out as Kero Blaster. That's with a G rather than a K. I don't know all of the details, but long story short, apparently Pixel got pretty far creating this game that was very similar, but a different game under the hood. And that was based on some comics that he would draw about himself and his girlfriend. His girlfriend portrayed as a cat and himself portrayed as this sort of sad-eyed frog. And that sprite seems to be one of the key elements that was carried over from the original Kero Blaster, which was canceled, into Kero Blaster, which was kind of a rebuild from scratch of Kero Blaster. So it's clear that this frog has some sort of meaning to Pixel. I think it's sort of a self-insert, and I kind of like how simple and kind of, I guess, like dead-eyed and basic he looks, because it's deceptively. There's something expressive about its simplicity. It's hard to really put my finger on.
I have often quoted something about Hello Kitty, and I think applies here, and that is that. The reason Hello Kitty was designed by Sanrio to have no mouth and a blank expression,
because she must scream,
yes, is because it encourages people to like project their emotions onto Hello Kitty, and I kind of think that that's the case here. The only time the frog ever shows emotions is when he gets an item pickup.
Gets his jacket. He's so happy.
Yeah, oh my God. That's the best moment in this game for me, was when he gets that jacket, which, first off, is a great-looking jacket. Really,
it is a great-looking jacket.
Really looks good on this frog. And, like, second, when he gets it, he leaps into the air and turns to face the player and has this enormous froggy grin on his face. And it's still a super simple sprite, but now it's an extremely happy one. And I love that moment.
Yeah, the frog is probably the simplest and most noticeably simple sprite of all of them.
Almost looks like a Commodore 64 sprite.
Yeah, at least the other ones generally have multiple colors, have more expressions, seem a lot less flat than Frog, which is just his name. And yeah, I mean, but the thing is too that, at least for me in a game like this, which can sometimes be a little bullet helly, you're not even really looking at the frog the most. You're looking at what's happening on the screen. You're, getting ready to dodge or jump or shoot or whatever.
The thing that I liked the most about this game, you just touched on, Nate. You just said it is a little bit bullet helly. This game goes from being a little bit of a hell for frogs to absolutely being a hell for anything else on screen, because your frog, like the weapons, which I want to spend some time talking about, once you've got them upgraded, you are just a god of like destroying force, like pouring bullets all over the screen, bouncing off of everything.
So before we dig into the mechanics too deeply, let's talk just a little bit about the setup of the quote-unquote story. Something I think that sets this game apart from Cave Story is that it has an incredibly minimal story. Cave Story seems on the surface like it has a minimal story, and then there is actually kind of a lot going on.
It gets deeper and gets deeper and it gets deeper. Like I love the Cave Story, and I think it's very, very interesting and very, very unique. And so I was going to Kero Blaster, assuming the same sort of care and world building and story building that I found in Cave Story, and it's not there. But what is there is very strange and unlike most games that I've played.
I actually kind of have to disagree with you, Nate, because like the things that I like about Cave Story, there are a thousand things I could say I love about Cave Story, but it's quote unquote lore. I don't care about it at all. It's very boring and lame. And I mean, at the most, like some of the characters are cute visually, but like I don't really care about the story of Cave Story. I don't care about the Mimigas. I don't care about the doctor and his crazy brain or whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
But this game, it kind of dispenses with that and leaves just a little absurdist premise.
Reagan, you didn't have like a moment where you cried a little when you found out that the mean lady and the lunchbox were feeding flowers to the Migas, and that they were turning into big ol' Migas, and you had to fight the big ol' Migas, and that those were like your friends, but they were turned big by the red flowers?
No, I didn't. I didn't cry about that at all.
Well,
neither
Reagan,
did I.
We don't. Yeah,
I didn't.
we don't need
I
to,
didn't cry. I know, what a dumb story.
Hey, we don't need to talk about the Kelly's cold, dead black hearts on this podcast any longer.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, and I'm not saying that Cave Story was this like groundbreaking, heartfelt story, but I just thought the way that it was told, the fact that it was this like Metroidvania where it focuses mostly on, shooting things, that they did manage to weave a really weird and interesting story into it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to shit on Cave Story, like, God forbid. But, like, one of the contrasts between this game and that is that it doesn't spend an ounce of effort trying to set up lore. It gets you directly to playing an action game. And what time it does spend outside of that action is mostly just jokes. And it's actually really charming and cute. So the premise is that you are Frog, and you are one half, presumably, or one part of Cat and Frog, which is a teleporter company.
So no, I mean, I think you're even explaining more than it gives you as you first get started, because you're just walk down a hallway and you get teleported. So you answer a phone, and then you blow up some black things, and then some inexplicable shit happens, and then there's a scene where it's like your cat that you talked to and the weird pink blob, and one of them's like, "What does he do again?" And the other one's like, "Oh, he's a custodian. He's like a janitor."
Yeah,
that's the job of the frog.
You're a gun-toting frog janitor. Cool.
The cat gives you a real talking to, too. It really doesn't feel like a partnership, because every time you go to talk to the cat, it's just like screaming at you as if it's like your boss, and then you go and you get teleported by two strange assistants who kind of talk behind your back and talk behind the boss's back. And they're like, "Oh, you go clean this up." And what you're cleaning up is, I guess, the worlds that they're teleporting to, and they get infested by monsters. So you're going to clean up these places to make them safe to teleport to.
Yeah, I think so. Like, there's 4. Is it 4? How many main zones are there? I'm actually misremembering.
7.
7. Jeez, I'm totally miscounting. Yeah. There's 7 main zones, but I think one of those is like the back to the office level. So I guess it's really more 6. There's 6 main zones, and each of those levels you teleport in, and your job is to use a variety of guns to shoot various different monsters, and particularly these quote-unquote things that are like black blobs with eyes. They look very Spirited Away. Or is that the right movie? The Ghibli movie with the dust bunnies and...
Yeah, I'm sorry. That is a hole in my...
Never mind.
Why you gotta be ignorant all your life?
Yeah. The frog is just going into these various sort of bizarre worlds to try to clean them out and make them safe for teleporting.
One thing that I really loved about this game was the structure was really, really good. Like, you start off for every level, pretty much the same. You're getting teleported somewhere, and if you're starting over from the hospital, which is great. And like you start off by, at the start of every level, just go right. This isn't like a Metroidvania like his other work. This is really simple. You just keep on going and blow up everything. And halfway through the level, there's going to be a bubble that you can inexplicably jump into because there's a cat frog logo on it. And when you do so, you get to visit a store, upgrade your shit with all the coins you've been picking up. And then there's probably a mini boss and a boss.
A weird guy librarian who throws books at you, who becomes like a mechanic later and throws wrenches at you.
That's the thing. Like, there's elements in this that repeat that aren't even part of the.
Who is this guy? Does he just
what is
work
up
here?
With that? Like,
There's
things.
Why am I killing this? Why am I killing this nice librarian?
Why is his head
he's throwing
so big?
books.
It's the black things, I guess.
Yeah, he's throwing books at me.
It's like full of little like mysterious stuff that it doesn't fully explain, but doesn't really feel like it needs to be fully explained because it is so kind of, I guess, a little bit absurdist. I guess you could really dig into this and try and construct lore around it, but you don't need to.
The thing artistically that I think we're latching onto right there is that there's a groundedness to this game that makes those weird things seem extra weird. So like you'll be in a level where you're going through a hotel that's like old and rotted out, and it's a very like real world feeling place. Like it's well decorated, well designed. It's like his art is on point for this stuff. And then you run into a giant fish, I guess is what happened there. And it just gets continually weirder and weirder and weirder throughout the game, while still keeping these moments of like groundedness, like those guys at the end of every level that look like, hey, there's a guy here fixing the lights. Why do all these light fixtures fall on me? And then there's always this one guy. What's up?
So you were talking about the sort of like rhythm of moving through these levels.
Yes.
And that's something that originally really threw me off about the game, even when I first started it on PS4, until I kind of figured out what that rhythm is all about. So this game is designed for each of these levels to be replayed multiple times, but not start to finish. You have 3 lives. You are usually, when you're starting a level, you're usually a bit underpowered for it. And everything drops coins. And so you go into the level, you try not to die, you kill a bunch of dudes and get coins from them. Maybe you can find some secrets. They hide like safes and coin bags and things all over the levels in different places. And ultimately, you'll probably die. On any given level, I think I like game overed and went back to the hospital at least once on any given level in the game. And if you kind of game over and have to continue, it's going to start you back at the beginning of that level. But you've by then gotten enough coins that you can upgrade your guns and other stuff. So there are a bunch of different things you can pick up throughout the game. New weapons and a jetpack that lets you do a double jump, the jacket. And most of those, or at least the weapons, can be upgraded several times. And it's pretty expensive to do that in terms of number of coins. But they make an enormous difference. So, you might be getting up to the point of a boss in one level and dying several times and have to start the whole level again. But it never really feels like that big of a setback because you can get back to that point pretty quickly, get a bunch more coins on the way, and then upgrade your gun and not exactly one-shot kill him, but get past a boss that was giving you trouble. Once you've done a little bit of upgrading, something that was very difficult before becomes extremely easy.
This is actually the only part of the game that I had a little bit of frustration with. And I've been trying to figure out why, because roguelikes are one of my favorite types of games, so I don't have a problem with playing things over. I like, mastery being a thing, so part of this is getting better at, like, predicting the monsters and learning the bosses. So generally I like those elements in games. So when you say, oh yeah, you got to play the levels a few times to level up, like, generally that's something that I don't have a problem with. I mean, I played Destiny for like a year and a half, and that is just basically playing the same shit over and over and over and over and over. So, generally speaking, that is something that I have no problem with, and in fact, tend to like. I did, to a degree, get frustrated later in the game with this system, and I think it was because, for the most part, I'd say 95% of my deaths were on the bosses themselves. I generally didn't have much problem getting through the levels, so it would be play through the whole level, get my coins, get to the boss, probably die a few times just learning how the boss works, and then, need to continue, play through the whole level to get back to the boss. And then by that point, I figured out how to beat the boss, and I usually could get him on my second time, but maybe it would take me to my third time. And especially as the game gets a little bit gets further on, these zones do get longer. And so, I think it was the fourth level, I kind of started to feel like a grind, and not the fun kind of grind. I just have to get through this so I can get to try the boss again. And I won't say that this was an overwhelming feeling for me. I really, really, really enjoyed this game.
I went into this game with, I had a similar problem with the game, but I think my, to me, that really, the grindiness really expresses itself right at the start and right at the end. And, I had a hard time getting started in this game, and then I spent a phenomenal amount of time, at least an hour and a half, just solid on repeating the last level in order to get to the final boss and try it again and again. And, in the middle, everything was really smooth sailing. That part felt really, really good. And this is such a hard problem for game developers because, bad checkpointing is really easy to do. Every way that I've seen checkpointing done, from the semi-optional crystal globes in Shovel Knight to games where you basically lose no progress at all,
Blaster Master.
Blaster Master is
the Blaster Master Zero.
Yeah. And any way you do it, you're making a very meaningful, hugely hard to carefully balance decision for your players. So it's kind of hard.
Yeah. Well, it's funny though. I had a different sort of experience though, and I think it was part of my problem is I don't think I used to continue until the third zone. I kind of managed to just make my way through it, and then I think I was very underpowered because I was not grinding. This concept of having to play these levels over and over and over didn't really happen to me until I got into the kind of the midpoint of the game, and then it kind of hit me like a truck, and I had to basically play catch up.
I think we actually even talked about a moment over Slack where this was in the level that was kind of the underground with the train area, and you reach a shop there, and this is one of the hardest parts of the game that you've been in up to this point. And when you leave this shop and continue on in the game, there's a huge area that's nothing but a hallway full of low-level enemies, and you can mow them down completely. And that was when it clicked for me, honestly, I'm gonna suck enough at this game that I can't do it with just the low-level guns that I have. So I'm gonna go back and forth and walk down this hallway, and I spent a good solid 3 minutes doing that, collecting enough coins to buy another level of upgrade and then continue on from there. But getting to points where I feel like I have to do that is, it's not great.
I guess I had I hit some sort of sweet spot for the ramping on the difficulty here, because it really felt like pretty much every single level I had to continue exactly once and then got past it. And usually I could get past the first boss, the mid-boss of each level, on the first run and get through to that middle that middle checkpoint that usually follows the first boss. And at that point, you can buy very cheaply a refill of all of your hearts and also start up doing all of your upgrades. So I could almost always get past that middle boss and then buy some sort of fancy upgrade to use against the final boss. And, usually I would end up having to go back through, but it does at least, it makes you replay the level, but it never makes you replay a boss, which is really, I guess, merciful design there. So even though I would often have to start the level over from scratch in order to get back to that final boss, by that point I knew the layout, I had already just upgraded my gun, and the first half of the level that maybe took me 30 minutes to get through when I first went through it, I could get through in 10. And that actually felt great because I felt like I was suddenly, I was really making progress even within a single level. It felt like I was getting better all the time.
Yeah. And they do some really cool scaling things too with like one of the last zones, you fight two of what was the first boss, just like out in the land, and you're just, completely obliterate them, and you're just like, man, I really have come a long way. So they definitely,
that's well done.
Yeah, there's some balancing.
That represents, there's kind of a build to we were talking about kind of the build of the game, like that last level that you're describing, where you're going back and seeing practically every creature that you fought in the game over again, just all in one chaotic pile. That's and you're mowing through it with these gigantic, super overpowered weapons that fill the screen completely with bouncing, projectiles. That's a fun level to play even a few times.
Yeah, there was just a moment for me though. So I had like gotten to the boss because, like I said, I mean, I pretty much only died to the final bosses, and so I'd get to the boss, I'd fail, and I'd have to play it again. And Molly was watching me play. And she saw me play all the way through a level, fail on the boss, and then play all the way through the level again. And she's like, is this fun for you? Like playing the exact same level over. And it's like, well, I guess that's not really the point of this moment. Like, it wasn't necessarily fun for me to replay the exact same thing. Multiple times in a row.
That's too bad. And I think that the big difference for me was mostly that by the time I was replaying the start of the level again, which I almost always had to do, I had just upgraded something, and I was able to make use of that, and it felt suddenly fresh in some way. With the weapon upgrades in this, we should probably spend some time talking about just how good the weapons are in this game.
Oh, yes.
They're so good.
Yeah.
We don't need to list every single one, but there's 4 key weapons, and I'm not going to remember what... Each one of them has multiple sort of upgrade levels. I'm not going to remember what all of them are properly.
Well, Reagan, there is the laser that starts off as the pea shooter, becomes the repeater, and then upgrades to the laser and the laser Uzi.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I never got to the laser Uzi, I don't think.
What? Oh, man, that's the best weapon in the game. It does... The laser Uzi is the highest damage output, so you can just, cut through stuff.
Oh, wait, I did get that one. I didn't get the highest level of the fan weapon, but I did get the laser Uzi.
Yeah,
You're right.
That's the second best weapon in the game.
Absolutely. So if you didn't get the laser Uzi, then you are missing out the only thing that saves you from the enormous damage sponge enemies that are another complaint that I have with this game. There are a lot of enemies in this game where you have to really unload on them for a significant amount of time. The laser Uzi does a ton of damage. I really enjoyed the kind of more edge case weapons in this, which I think this is just a touchstone of Pixel's game design, because in Cave Story, this was also true. There's a huge variety of different weapons, and you had that same kind of blaster mastery upgrade system for them, where you would, if you took damage, you would lose some of your weapon power, and the weapons would devolve. In this, you're upgrading them permanently in exchange for coins, but there's a huge variety, and some of them are really high powered.
Well, I think saying a huge variety is a bit of an overstatement. There are 4 types of weapons.
There's 4,
but they each have their own really, really interesting use case. the one you start with, the pea shooter, is the most basic. It's straight ahead, and it feels like, it's an obvious, like, middle of the range.
Each one of the 15 different like levels of the weapons controls and behaves a little bit differently, though. So I do think there's a lot of variety there.
There's 4 weapons, each that have 3 to 4 upgrades. So if you're including each upgrade tier as its own weapon, then yeah, it does kind of have a range. But they're mostly just like iterations of the previous version. I mean, the only one that gets like like an example. So you start with like the fan weapon, which when it starts out, it shoots a wave of energy that is about as big as the frog, actually a little bit bigger above and below the frog. So it's great for clearing out like a wave of enemies. And then as you upgrade it, it basically gets wider and wider and wider until you get to the point that you're shooting a huge fan in front of you of projectiles that actually bounce off the wall. So it's great for clearing like a huge area. Or the laser Uzi becomes from a pea shooter that actually only has a range of, 10 feet in front of the frog to a wall of energy that is going like pulsating and does the most damage. So they are technically different weapons in each iteration, but they're really just like, how could this become a better version of itself?
Yeah, and the other 2 weapons are a little more situational because they will tend to be like the bubble weapon tends to arc upwards, or it also floats. So in some situations, you can use it to shoot above you in ways that you can't with the other weapons. And the fire weapon will kind of
arc downwards, Reagan. They roll along.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm mixing it up. Right, the bubble weapon arcs downwards and will roll along the ground, so you can fire it at things that are below you if there's a slope. And the same goes in reverse, for the fire weapon, which will essentially climb slopes. And you can use it to burn things that are slightly higher than you. So I found myself switching to those in a lot of situations.
And you ultimately get like a fire shield too with the fire weapon, which is pretty cool.
The best weapon in the game, without a doubt, is the Star Mine, which is the highest upgraded version of the bubble gun. Just because of the description, because I was really enjoying the bubble weapon. Like there was a bubble gun in Cave Story too, and I really liked that one. And here I am playing a new game by Pixel, and hey, it's got my favorite gun in it. And you get to the highest upgrade for it, and Star Mine, increased travel speed and rate of fire for all the bubble lovers out there. Is the description. And I was like, hey, that's me.
See, that's so funny too. And I think this is actually a great like endorsement for the game. That was your favorite weapon. I almost never used it. The only time I used it was actually, the only time I really used it is actually a really, really important moment. It was, to me, the key weapon to defeating the final boss. And I don't know how you beat the final boss without the Star Mine. So I think it was great balance. I mean, every weapon at some point is needed, but I very rarely used the bubble mine. I pretty much only used the laser Uzi, or the most upgraded fan weapon.
Even with all that, I used the laser Uzi on the final boss. I found the Star Mine to be ineffective because of the weird little scrambling black things that.
Yeah, but you use those to clear out the floor in case you do fall, so you're taking less damage if you hit the ground. So that's why I
just don't fall. Maybe that's why I.
Well, that's a good point.
Maybe that's why I died so many times.
Can't argue.
All the weapons were like exceptionally good and fun. Like everything about controlling this game, at least in this version, and the shooting was excellent. And I'm just so glad that we went back and played this. I had kind of written this off. Like I'd kind of thought, well, that was a weird experiment from this clearly excellent game developer that just didn't work because of its platform. And I was so wrong. It was just a game like on the wrong platform for me. And this may very well be perfect on the iPhone for you. I don't know. If you feel like you can play action-oriented games on your phone, then maybe this is the right platform maybe that's the right platform to play it on. So you can get this game on iOS for $5. You can get it on Steam for something like 10. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's 10 everywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's also $9.99 on PlayStation 4, which is where we played it. And I absolutely 100% recommend the PS4 version of this game, and probably identically the PC version if that's what you prefer.
Yeah, totally. I think we all recommend it. And please don't let my sort of gripes with a particular aspect of the game push you off from it, because clearly we all had our own experiences, and that was, even with that, I really enjoyed it. And one thing I just want to shout out too is just like the shooting was so simple and so satisfying. I mean, it's just hold square and you just unleash a hail of gunfire. And one thing that was interesting to me too, for a game that had you're shooting in kind of like 3 dimensions. You're either not 3 dimensions, but you're either shooting forward, backwards, or up. If you have to, as you're shooting, you have to let go of shooting to aim up and then start shooting again. It's not something where you're like running around and controlling the gun independently of the frog. You're controlling, like, it's all one moment or movement. So you have to, if I'm shooting forward, I can move forward or backwards while I'm shooting. I can jump while I'm shooting. But if I want to shoot up, I have to let go of the button and then press up and then shoot, and then I can move the frog freely. And so it's kind of like tank control-y feeling.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it may be a holdover from the like original iOS controls where you'd kind of set it to and forget it to shoot in a particular direction. But it still worked on the PlayStation 4 for me.
Well, that's what I mean. It works. Like it's a little different than what you're expecting from most games that have. Like, I don't think that's how most.
Yeah, it doesn't control like Contra, for example.
Those games you have more independent control of the gun and the player, whereas this one you're just kind of holding square and running around and shooting, and then readjusting the direction you want to shoot.
It sort of goes without saying on this show as well, but this hits a real sweet spot for length with this kind of game. This game took me probably 4.5 or 5 hours. And I think any shorter, and I would have felt like it wasn't long enough quite to give me the complete experience I was looking for. But any longer, and I think I probably would have gotten frustrated with it and not completed it. I think it's a really it's kind of the perfect length for this type of game. It's much, much shorter than Cave Story. And that wasn't exactly an epic length game either. But like at 4.5 hours, this is, I think all retro styled games ought to strive for a sort of a, one and done short weekend length, because I don't think we have the patience for.
Yeah, this actually took me 7 hours.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You suck.
I ended at 5. I ended at 5 hours as well. I think if I had my way, this game actually would have had remove the repeat mechanic and just have like 7 more zones. But that's obviously a lot to like, hey, indie developer, just double the amount of content in your games, But I just enjoyed my first run through a level like so much that I wanted like more levels. I wanted to see more and explore more and all that. But yeah, 5 hours, sweet spot for a game like this.
Well, you're in luck because there are more levels to this game. Like once you beat it, there is this whole New Game Plus mode that I think is a little bit more than what you're typically going to see in a New Game Plus, because it seems like it has a new story. The frog changes color.
Wow.
And the levels are very different in terms of like enemy placement and stuff. So it seemed, I didn't get too far into it, but it seemed like there was like big changes.
That's really surprising to me, because all it says is when you beat the game, it's like you've unlocked. I can't remember what word they call it, but then in parentheses it says hard mode. So it's like you've unlocked hard mode, and so 95% of games that means okay, we're gonna ramp up like enemies on the screen. We're gonna lower the amount of coins that you can get, and hits are gonna take more damage. So I was like, no, I don't really need that. I get why it's there. I'm glad they put it in there. But I feel content with my 5 hour, regular mode experience. But I find out there's way more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what they change, and I've played a little bit of it. I haven't like beaten it again. But the first kind of noticeable thing is the story is definitely different. Like this is a sequel story. So if you want more time with these characters, such as they are, you can get it. And the cat boss invites the whole company to go to a weekend retreat at an
onsen
Japanese spa. Yeah, a hot spring spa. So you get your frog and cat fan service, one would hope. But
I think that's great because it's kind of it's almost a parody of the sort of like, I guess like late game material in a lot of Japanese games. There's always the, like, I think of the like onsen chapter that's always inserted into the end of a Persona game, for example.
And they've got, you get to play through the whole game again, but there are actually like new enemies to fight and stuff.
There's a new
like
gun?
The bosses. There's a whole new gun you can get. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this new game. Plus, I honestly, maybe we should count this game as more like a 10-hour game and include all that boss content.
I wish it told you that. I wish it didn't just say, "Do you want to play hard mode?" Because I feel that probably my reaction to I'm going to speak for everyone here, but I feel like that's probably what most people do is say, "Oh, hard mode, meh." But if it's like a whole new story with a new gun, with new bosses, like that should just be like, "Hey, do you want to play chapter 2?"
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right? Yeah, it kind of feels that way.
Then I'd be like, hell yeah, go right into chapter 2. Why not? Like I said, I wanted more, just not have the end of the game be where the end of the game was and have it scale differently and just let me play all the way through that too, you know?
Oh, okay, Reagan. So the name of this mode, you said like whatever it is, hard mode. It's Zangyou Mode, which is overtime mode. Which is, I guess, the they're because which makes sense because in the new story they are working overtime at the end of the week trying to get done with everything as quick as they can so they can go to the hot spring.
Well, I think it's about time that we all head to the hot spring as well. So
yes, let's take this podcast to the official short game hot spring, guys.
So this was a really awesome game. I'm really glad that we went back to it. Next week we have a game that we've been looking forward to as a show for a very, very long time. Sorry, I did just sort of cut everybody off there. Is everybody comfortable?
No, I just want to say, Reagan. I just want to say, great transition, great transition, Reagan.
Next week, we have a game that, as a show, we've been looking forward to for a really, really long time. And that is What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yes.
Now, when you're listening to this, it's already out. But today, when we're recording this comes out tomorrow. And we've been looking forward to this game for a really long time. It's from the developers of The Unfinished Swan, which was something that we covered a while back and thought was absolutely super cool. Go back and listen to that episode if you missed The Unfinished Swan. It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, they are the reigning champs of the weirdly trippy walking simulator. So, yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, and so What Remains of Edith Finch, we don't know very much about it at this point, and I've been specifically trying to avoid things because I have heard some folks say that this is a game best approached without knowing very much about it. That's why I hope that you'll take this as warning. I'm pretty confident this is going to be a great one. I read some advanced reviews and impressions. They were all glowing. If you like the quote-unquote walking simulator type of game, this is probably one to check out as soon as you possibly can. So we're going to be talking about it next week. It's probably going to be pretty spoiler heavy. And it's a game that's probably best experienced fresh. So if you are hearing the sound of my voice and you're looking for something to play, maybe make that your next game and we'll talk about it and let us know what you think about it, because we're going to be playing it tomorrow, I guess, and hopefully bringing you an episode about it very soon.
The Unfinished Swan was a beautifully interesting game, and I am very, very much looking forward to What Remains of Edith Finch. Even the title is evocative, and I too want to avoid spoilers. Literally, all I know about this game is the name and that it was made by the people who made Unfinished Swan, and so I'm trying to go into it as fresh as possible.
I've heard slightly more than that, but not enough to be spoilery or anything, and everything sounded really cool. So,
Finch hype.
If you want to check out our show, first of all, thank you for listening to The Short Game. If you like the show, the best way to support us is to go to our website and then click through to iTunes and leave us a review. We really appreciate 5-star reviews. They are the only way to support the show. We don't have any sort of Patreon or anything, so we do really appreciate those, and they make a difference. I know a lot of shows say that, and they say it because it's true. It's one of the only ways that people discover podcasts. So if you have the time, write us an iTunes review.
Yes, and I want to give a quick shout out to a couple people who have done just that. We love you. So shout out to Frankly Darko. He said, amongst many nice things, that we are usually funny, which is just the biggest compliment that I can.
Bold-faced lie.
Because I'm usually unusually unfunny.
I hope that one day on my tombstone it just says Nate Heininger, usually funny. That's what I'm really go for. And also to these are the names that they give us when they write the review. To Donna Isabel, who says, thanks for the show. Well, Donna, we are happy to bring it to you. And if you want to hear your iTunes tag read on our show, please let us know what you think. We love hearing from you.
We also love feedback of any kind. If you want to let us know what you think of the show, or let us know about games that you think we ought to be covering, and that's some of the most useful feedback folks send us. A pretty large proportion of the games we cover on this show are due to people recommending them to us. Best way to do that is through our website. Go to www.theshortgame.net. There's a contact form on that page where you can send us a message. You can also reach us on Twitter. We are @_shortgame, and we love Twitter, so if you drop us a line there, we're sure to see it and respond. You can find me on Twitter as well. I'm @RaganK, that's RayGanK. Nate, where can people find you?
You can also find me on Twitter @NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Also over on Twitter @8BitShane.
And thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Short Game.